Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the MMA webinar series. Today is the 2016 Programmatic Quality Series brought to you by Dataku. Subject, 5 tips for demystifying viewability. Before we get started with the webinar, let me give you a little overview on what's happening with the MMA. As you know, the MMA serves chief marketers and their teams. Our reason for being is to accelerate the transformation and innovation of marketing through mobile, driving business growth with closer and stronger consumer engagement. We do that by leaning on our strategic pillars, helping cultivate inspiration, building capabilities for success, demonstrating measurement and impact, and advocacy. We're a worldwide global organization with over 800 members, from American Express to Walmart, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Facebook, Google, Group M, Unilever, you name it. We have everybody in the marketer, agency, media seller, technology, and operator ecosystem. Today, our webinar will have a Q&A at the end where you can ask questions of our presenter. And you can also, I'll give you the answer to the first 2 questions everybody asks. Will the webinar be available for later viewing, and will the presentation be available for later downloading? The answer to both is yes. Everyone who registers for the webinar will receive a follow-up email within 48 hours of the webinar, giving you a link to both. But in the meantime, why don't you share your insights by using the hashtag MMAWeb, or you can follow Dataku or MMA Global at Dataku at MMA Global. So, to present today is RORY Edwards, the Senior Director of Business Development out of Dataku in Boston. I'm your moderator, Leo Scull, and I'm the VP of Industry Programs at the MMA here in New York City. Without further ado, here's RORY.
Perfect. Thank you for the intro, Leo, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to talk about the topic of viewability today, and you can see the agenda in front of you. We're going to run through a few questions, few topics. What is viewability? 5 findings from Dataku's recent viewability study, 5 recommendations to address viewability, and then Dataku viewability solutions and some case studies. But before we get into that, I do want to just start off by telling you quickly, who is Dataku? So Dataku is a leading demand-side platform helping brand advertisers to make marketing better through data science. Our vision is to enable the world's leading brands to truly master marketing ROI. We help customers with media activation, data management, marketing analytics, cross-device connections, and also with emerging channels like programmatic TV. And today we'd like to share some of our experiences working with these leading brands and helping them to understand and address the large and growing concern around viewability of digital advertising. Perfect. So first, we'll begin with the baseline question. What is viewability? So viewability is an online advertising metric that aims to measure whether or not an ad has the opportunity to be viewed by a consumer. The basic concept is fairly straightforward. However, it's important to highlight that just because an ad is viewable, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily seen by the consumer. It simply has the opportunity to be viewed by the consumer. There's also a technical definition of viewability that gets a bit more complex. The IAB, the Interacting Advertising Bureau, and the Media Rating Council, the MRC, qualify a display ad impression as viewable if greater than or equal to 50% of the ad's pixels appear in the viewable space of an in-focus browser tab for at least 1 second post-ad render. And that's for sort of your typical banner display type advertising. So with that technical definition of the metric, the reality is that an ad may not be entirely visible, or not visible for much more than 1 second for the ad to be measured as viewable. So while it's not a perfect metric, though, viewability is a great indicator of whether or not ads have the chance to accomplish their goal of reaching and influencing the target consumers. So when it comes to measuring viewability, there are 2 key metrics that matter. The first is in-view rate. This is simply the percentage of ads displayed that are considered to be in view according to the MRC definition of viewability. It's important to note that this metric doesn't consider the cost of in-view impressions, so it shouldn't be thought of as a measure of the efficiency of deploying an advertising budget. The second metric is viewable CPM, or vCPM. This metric does account for the cost of the purchased ad impressions. vCPM is calculated by taking the CPM paid for the media and dividing by the in-view rate. So in this instance, the lower the in-view rate, the higher the vCPM is going to be. So to illustrate these metrics, imagine a scenario where you purchased 1,000 impressions for $5. Half of those impressions were in view. You would have a 50% in-view rate. but your viewable CPM would actually be $10 as you paid $5 and you only got 500 viewable impressions. If all of those 1,000 impressions were in view, you would have a 100% in view rate, and the vCPM would be $5, the same as your CPM. So viewability is an increasingly important topic for brands and advertisers today. Ensuring the quality of digital advertising buys is a constant challenge in today's ecosystem. Whether the issue is fraud, brand safety, or viewability, marketers need to be sufficiently educated to ask the right questions of their agencies and technology partners. Over the past few years, viewability in particular has become a prominent area of focus within the industry and an ongoing pain point for marketers, demand-side platforms, and publishers alike. A recent Myers BizNet survey of advertising and marketing executives revealed that 71% of brand marketers and 70% of media agency executives feel that viewability is a top concern, right up there with click fraud, bot fraud, and ad blocking. Unfortunately, the reality is that only around half of digital ads have the chance of being seen by the consumer today. While many advertisers are seeking to achieve in-view rates of 70% or even higher, the benchmarks consistently show a different reality. When looking at viewability figures supplied by the largest accredited verification players, they all agree that only around half of digital ads have the chance to be seen by consumers. With a stat like that, it's no surprise that 70% of ad executives are concerned about this topic. And the story is fairly consistent whether you're looking at display inventory like banners or looking at video inventory and even across mobile devices. The highest average in-view rates are only around 60%. While buying directly from publishers achieves higher average in-view rates than buying in the open exchange, the differences are sometimes minimal and the prices are often significantly higher. That's a topic we'll get into a bit more later in the webinar. But first, the question is, whose problem is this? Whose problem is viewability? And we at Dataku believe that it's really an industry-wide problem that needs to be solved by everybody. The implications of poor viewability extend beyond verification partners to the broader advertising ecosystem. Brands, advertisers, demand-side platforms, publishers, and supply-side platforms are all impacted by viewability challenges. Brands have the clear objective of influencing their target consumers, and so it's no surprise that they're increasingly setting viewability targets or minimums and requiring their agencies and DSP partners to adhere to them. The agencies and DSPs, in turn, are left trying to achieve the mandated outcome of the brands. They use technology and direct procurement to direct those advertising dollars towards publishers and placements with higher viewability. The result of this is that publishers can either be winners or losers, benefiting if they have highly viewable inventory or a direct sales team that can surface this inventory to buyers. If the sites are not well suited to viewable inventory, they see the impact in the inventory's revenue yield. SSPs are not able to avoid the issue either. As their publisher clients see drops in ad revenue, they look to SSPs to help. As a result, the SSPs have begun to help the publisher clients by layering on data to help the buyers find the viewable inventory more easily, or even by providing tools to the publishers to help them enable highly viewable ad units within their sites. The Dataku is focused on helping advertisers by working with MRC-accredited viewability verification providers. Vendors such as DoubleVerify, Integral Ad Science, and ComScore have worked to develop leading viewability solutions that are accredited by the MRC. These vendors provide solutions to measure the in-view rate of advertisements, but they also have built solutions to help optimize the deployment of this advertising spend by working with predictions based on historical outcomes to achieve higher viewability. Together, the optimization tools along with the measurement tools can help advertisers achieve the desired outcomes, and in turn allow those advertisers to focus on the other more strategic aspects of their jobs. It's important to note that while these vendors do have MRC-accredited solutions for desktop viewability, they're still working towards accreditation for mobile. Mobile is emerging and evolving quickly, so advertisers and measurement firms are still catching up to the status quo for desktop advertising. Good. So after that introduction to viewability, I'm going to shift and highlight 5 findings from Dataku's recent study. But first, to perform this research, in July 2016, Dataku launched a 14-day test campaign across desktop display, video, and mobile. The goals of Dataku's viewability tests were to measure viewability at an aggregate level, at an exchange level, and at a domain level to really see differences at those different granularity levels. The second goal was to compare viewability percentages for the same creatives and same placements across different viewability vendors. And then finally, we were looking to measure viewability rates for campaigns running without the benefit of any optimization. So basically, there's nobody trying to achieve higher viewability outcomes. There are no tools and practice in place. We're basically just bidding on inventory and seeing what the results show. So we were simply hoping to highlight the differences, nuances, and challenges with measuring and optimizing to viewability in the current ecosystem. And so the following data set that we'll be talking through is derived from the Dataku test campaign, which was, again, buying completely non-optimized inventory across a variety of exchanges, essentially bidding the same price for any given ad opportunity. So now to the conclusions. First, a more general conclusion. High-end view rates tend to come at a higher price. So what we saw in this study and what you can see in this chart here is that the higher the average viewability, which you'll see on the vertical axis, the more expensive the media was, which you'll see on the horizontal axis. This shouldn't be too surprising, as more and more advertisers are utilizing data sets such as whitelist or blacklist to achieve viewability, or pre-bid optimization tools basically help them find the ad opportunities that are more likely to be in view. It means that competition for these ad opportunities are going to increase and drive up the prices, whereas those ad opportunities that are historically seen to not be as often in view are going to have less competition and therefore be cheaper. The second insight was that we found that performance, as measured here by click-through rate, does in fact improve as viewability also improves. So as you can see in this chart, our study showed that click-through rate increased with viewability. So again, viewability here is on the vertical axis, and then click-through rate here is on the horizontal axis. It makes good sense to me that if your ads more frequently has the opportunity to be seen by the consumer, it's also then going to more frequently result in a conversion for the advertiser. We see this as a nice validation of viewability as a quality metric, which can correlate to the opportunity to reach and influence your target consumer. For a third finding, we learned that the results of measuring in-view rate, while generally correlated across vendors, is not always consistent across vendors. So to illustrate this, what you see here is a set of bar charts that shows the average viewability rate as measured by two different viewability vendors. In all of these tests, we're measuring the results of a single test campaign using multiple vendor technologies, so basically measuring the same impressions. So what you can see here is that for the exact same purchase impressions, two vendors had differing results in in-view rates. And the more granular your level of measurement is, the higher the difference you'll see in the measured in-view rates by vendor. So when you look on the left side here at the campaign results aggregated at a high level, in this instance, looking at an inventory exchange in aggregate and all of the impressions for that inventory exchange, you'll see that the rates are different, but only by a few percentage points, 3% here to be exact. One thing I'll call out here is, in this case, the in-view rates at the exchange level are not really indicative of what we typically see for exchange-wide viewability rates, but we would say it's the result of the lack of optimization for this test. So, don't be alarmed by that low viewability percentage right there. But as you move more to the right along this chart, you'll get more granular in measurement, and the results will differ more drastically. So when you look at the publisher level in aggregate, the measurement shows a 5% difference. And when you look at the specific domain or page URL that the ad served on, you can see a 21% difference in scoring. This is a fairly drastic difference in scoring for the same exact ads as measured by two different vendors. So moving on to the fourth insight, the next set of data we want to share compares the in-view rates for buys made in the open exchange versus those made in the private exchange. And what you can see here are the comparisons between those two, the results for those two buys made in private marketplace versus open marketplace for unique publishers that have different content focuses. You can also see different colored bars representing the results as measured by different viewability measurement vendors. In comparing open exchange versus private exchange buys for a consistent set of news, tech, sports, fashion, and business publishers, in general, private exchange does, in fact, achieve higher in-view rates than open exchange. We also did see some examples where even high viewability PMP buys, or to state it more clearly, PMP deals that were intended to result in higher viewability scores did see even lower in-view rates than open exchange buys. The general conclusion here is that PMP buys do tend to outperform open exchange buys when it comes to in-view rate. But it's also important to recognize that the cost of those impressions may not mean that PMP is a more efficient way to buy viewable impressions. The higher viewability may be coming at a cost that simply doesn't make sense. And so moving on to the next slide, if we kind of double click on this concept of efficiency of in-view impressions, it brings us to a pretty interesting insight here. We clearly saw that higher in-view rates does not necessarily mean you're going to get more viewable impressions for a given buy. So if we look not only at the in-view rates, but the vCPM of the impressions made on these top publishers, we can see that those in-view rates do come at a price. And so this chart shows in navy bars here, you can see for private marketplace, the in-view rates, and for those blue dots, you see the vCPM for those same PMP buys. And then likewise for open exchange, you can see the in-view rates are the purple bars and the vCPM are the pink dots. So for example here, looking at the top business sites, you can see that the in-view rate for PMP is slightly higher than open exchange, but that the cost of those in-view impressions is nearly 3 times what you get in the open exchange in vCPM. The same holds true for fashion, sports, and news sites here. If all you want to do is buy a viewable impression for the lowest cost, open exchange is going to be more likely to be your best bet. So this may be a bit counterintuitive, but we're going to address it a bit more in our recommendations section. Good, so we'll shift over there now. So we've seen so far that there are a couple different ways to evaluate viewability, and that there doesn't seem to be a simple approach to take viewability issues completely off the table. So here are Dataxu's 5 recommendations to advertisers for how to address viewability. First, we'd say it's critical to note that high viewability does not necessarily mean that your campaign is succeeding. Viewability is an important indicator of whether or not your campaign has the opportunity to influence your target consumers, but it does not guarantee that the campaign is successfully influencing them. We performed a survey of our top brands, and it revealed that the teams running programmatic in-house identify strong viewability as being very important, but they typically do not use viewability as a primary campaign KPI. It's just an important secondary KPI for them to monitor in conjunction with the other KPIs that are more associated with the outcomes they're looking to achieve. The second recommendation is to evaluate vCPM as a metric in order to account for the cost of an in-view impression. So, don't simply look at in-view rate because it doesn't tell you the whole story. Look also at the vCPM. And, to illustrate this, I want to walk through an example here. If you look at, we're going to show 3 different partners who are investing in advertising. Partner 1 here is buying advertising at a CPM of $9 with an in-view rate of 80%, which results in a vCPM of $11.25. Partner 2 is buying advertising at opportunities at a price of $5.50 with an in-view rate of 65%, which results in a vCPM of $8.46. And partner 3 has an in-view rate of 50% with a CPM of $3, resulting in a vCPM of $6. So all very different in-view rates with very different CPMs. In general, you see here, the higher the in-view rate, the higher the price of the media that's being purchased. So if all you care about is in-view rate, partner 1 is clearly doing the best and achieving 80%. But if you really care about getting the most viewable impressions for your money, or the most opportunities to truly influence your target consumer, you'll see that partner 3 is the most efficiently deploying their budget. If we look at how these campaigns perform with a $100,000 investment, we can see that partner 3, despite the lowest in-view rate, gets nearly twice the average viewable impressions as partner 1 and nearly 50% more than partner 2. This example is not really out of the ordinary for what we've seen at Dataxu, and we advise any advertiser to consider not only the in-view rate, but the efficiency of deploying their advertising budget when thinking about their objectives for viewability. Ultimately, buying highly viewable inventory is a good objective as long as you don't overpay for it. So our third recommendation is to really think through and understand the pros and cons of open exchange versus private exchange when it comes to viewability. So open exchange and private exchange buying are tactics that most advertisers will utilize in some form across their advertising spend. But when it comes to viewability, there are some differences to be aware of. Open exchange buying allows advertisers to take advantage of the full scale of programmatic buying and to buy inventory anywhere their target audience is. The buyer, in this case, is the one selecting which impressions and opportunities to bid on and ultimately buy, and as a result, they must be more diligent in ensuring they're finding the highly viewable inventory. When it comes to cost, open exchange buying means that you're paying the market spot price for that individual impression and not locked into higher pre-negotiated rates. This often translates into a better vCPM, which means a lower cost per viewable impression. The private exchange, on the other hand, allows an advertiser to more carefully curate the inventory they buy by working directly with a smaller set of publishers and defining the inventory attributes they're looking for in advance. When it comes to finding highly viewable inventory, this is positive because it forces publishers to take more accountability for the in-view rate of the inventory and often results in higher in-view rates. However, that accountability comes at a price, as publishers will look for advertisers to pay a premium for access to this inventory. So again, two tactics that you're probably going to utilize across most of your buys, but important to probably utilize them in conjunction so that you're not just locking yourself into a very high CPM for a high in-view rate and therefore, a higher vCPM. Tip number 4 here, advertisers should be prepared for some bumps in the road as viewability technology evolves and matures. So digital advertising and programmatic advertising are both evolving at a rapid pace, with channels like mobile and CTV being examples of that rapid growth. Unfortunately, it takes some time for each of these new channels to mature, and similarly, the verification vendors are working quickly to roll out new technologies to make viewability measurement and optimization work across all channels. So today, the industry has very solid solutions in place for desktop banner and video. However, channels like mobile are still evolving and maturing. It's happening quickly, but they're still not quite as robust as the solutions that are there for desktop. Despite this, though, viewability measurement is progressing and improving all the time, and advertisers are benefiting from this expanding coverage and helping to optimize their advertising deployments. Good. So finally, a slightly more complex recommendation here is to consider how viewability impacts your attribution model. The challenges with most existing attribution models is that they're not built to consider whether an ad was viewable or not. This really means that historically your attribution model would have given equal credit to an ad that was in view as to one that was not in view. So as a result, you may see some odd things if you start to optimize for viewability. For example, you may actually have more ads in view, but your attribution model may show poor performance relative to your earlier performance as a result of the higher cost for media for those in-view impressions. So in the future, attribution models are going to account for viewability. Steps are being taken today to do this, but we're in the early stages of that evolution. So the advice here is really to start thinking about this topic and start investigating how your attribution model may be impacted by viewability and how you may want to address that going forward. Perfect. So now I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes talking about Dataxu's approach to viewability and also highlighting a couple of case studies that can illustrate some successes that we've seen. So at Dataxu, we built a complete multi-vendor viewability solution to enable our customers to address their viewability needs. We've built out pre-bid viewability optimization tools as well as post-bid viewability measurement, and we feel it's critical to have both of these pieces in place to efficiently and effectively tackle viewability. We're also a key member of the Trustworthy Accountability Group, helping to define and abide by the industry guidelines around viewability. And Dataxu has also had a long-standing commitment to quality, offering free brand safety tools and also being first to market with the Dataxu 97% fraud-free guarantee, which includes integrated fraud protection and a money-back guarantee at no additional cost. And these types of quality initiatives all work hand in hand to ensure better return on investment and better outcomes for advertisers. So now, to illustrate the results of our pre-bid viewability solution, I want to share a couple of case studies. The first case study relates to a large auto manufacturer looking to improve viewability for one of their video campaigns. So basically, by implementing the Dataku pre-bid viewability solution to optimize the campaign buying, the auto manufacturer was able to increase the in-view rate by 32%, resulting in a 60% decrease in vCPM, which in turn translated to a dramatic reduction in the advertiser's cost per action metric. This is a great example showing that with the right optimization, it's possible to not only increase in-view rate, but also decrease the cost of each in-view impression, which can dramatically improve performance. A second and similar case study here involves a beauty brand that was looking to drive clicks on their ad units. So this advertiser was looking to tackle the issue of served versus viewable impressions for its video campaign. And to do so, they enabled viewability measurement as well as Dataku pre-bid optimization. The results, as you can see here, were tremendous, showing a lift in in-view rate from 32% to a rate of 78%, which far exceeded the industry benchmarks for video viewability. At the same time, the advertiser was able to decrease their cost per click by 80% by ensuring that the ads were viewable by the consumers they were targeting. And I think it's important to note for both of these case studies, the benefit of having this built-in pre-bid optimization is that it's less time for campaign managers to be worrying about optimizing campaigns by hand or manually. You know, the tools sort of optimize automatically and continuously, and they can benefit from some additional tweaks here and there, but it takes a lot of the work off of the table from day one. And I'll just finish up here by showing a quote from one of our customers, Team 1 on behalf of Lexus, who experienced a very significant and beneficial increase in in-view rates following the implementation of pre-bid viewability optimization. And we've heard similar reviews and raves from customers when we had these solutions put in place because they immediately saw those dramatic improvements, and it was able to be done with the click of a button versus a lot of manual effort. Perfect. So that's all I have. Thank you to everybody who's joined us and is listening in. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Leo for the audience Q&A.
Thank you, RORY. That was excellent. I appreciate and we all appreciate the focus on viewability. I did want to add one fact to your situation analysis regarding situation of mobile viewability in mobile. At the end of July, the MRC did issue its final mobile viewability guidelines. They've gone through a few tweaks. They are still they're out there and they're final. Those vendors who are in the process of getting accredited have agreed to abide by those final standards. I believe only one moat is completely MRC accredited, though I think a few more are in process. Secondly, those viewability guidelines can be downloaded from our website, MMAglobal.com. Go to the program pages under currency, and you'll find all the latest information on mobile viewability. So that said, now let's ask RORY a couple of key questions. Because I think this is on the mind of almost every advertiser and agency, why shouldn't advertisers simply demand 100% viewable inventory?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we fielded that one a few times. The answer is pretty simple to me. It's the industry just isn't there yet. There sort of needs to be some more action taken to even get close to 100% viewability, by everybody, including publishers, to really change and adapt their sites to serve only viewable ads. And that's a pretty big undertaking, especially if you want every publisher in the ecosystem to do that. So, I'd say that today, even publishers themselves can't guarantee that every served ad will be viewable. The behavior of the consumer that's actually viewing the page is always going to play a role there. For example, they could close the browser immediately or just click away from the page before, they've met the threshold for viewability. So that's a really hard thing to know in advance and to control for. And also in programmatic or real-time bidding, it's impossible to know ahead of time that an ad unit is going to be viewable, but it is very possible to buy placements that are more likely to be viewed, and then you get the benefit of high view rates with the efficiency of buying in an auction environment versus upfront commitments, where you can bring data, you can bring audiences. So I think 100% is an impossible goal today. We should continue to strive for that going forward. But I think that advertisers certainly should aim for high viewability and work with all of their partners to achieve that.
Yeah, you were talking about viewability. You compared a few anonymous vendors. But you and I both know there's a very important rate that hasn't been talked about, and that's the measure rate, meaning the rate to which a vendor or a publisher can measure the viewability of the ads on the page, on the screen. Could you talk a little about that? How should we think about this metric when it comes to viewability?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's a good question. Measure rate's it's an important metric as it speaks to how well the measurement vendor was able to evaluate viewability. So, for example, if measure rate's 100%, then, on every impression, they'd be able to evaluate whether or not an ad was viewable. But if it was 10%, it means that 9 out of 10 times they weren't even able to get a read as to whether or not it was viewable. So the reality is today nobody achieves 100% measurement. There's a lot of web technologies at play leading to some unavoidable incompatibility. But vendors do have strong measurement rates, and they're continuously working to address those gaps. So, while measure rate's important, it's more of a way to think about statistical significance in evaluating viewability. So I'd say for practical purposes, as long as your measurement technology is able to measure a meaningful percentage of your impressions across your whole buy, then viewability measurement results will be valuable and effective for evaluating viewability performance. But it is important to note that, if you're getting single-digit or even, low double-digit measure rates, there's probably something at play that you need to address in order to ensure you're getting the right results and optimizing against the right data.
Yeah, actually, Rory, thanks for that, because I'll go you one better on that. Working with the MRC on their board, as I do and as members of the IAB do, we are working feverishly to up the measurement rate. You should not have to accept measurement rates under 50%. You should not have to accept measurement rates under 75%. Most good, valid measurements are coming in closer to 90. So you really have to stick it to your vendors. You have to stick it to the publishers that they have to find the right way to measure viewability. It's an unacceptable situation where measurement is below a comfortable majority of impressions measured. So just so you know, the industry is moving very hard and very deliberately to correct that kind of imbalance in measurement. But let me go pose another question for you. What specifically should advertisers be requesting from the demand-side partners, like a Dataku, to help solve the viewability?
Yeah, so I think that advertisers should be requesting basically for their demand-side partners or DSPs to act as a partner, in helping them achieve viewability outcomes and achieve their benchmarks or their targets. Not just somebody who's providing a technology to turn on or off, but not helping them achieve those outcomes. So they should ensure that they're working with the leading vendors to implement solutions which result in higher viewability. They have multiple vendors available because different advertisers, have chosen different partners to work with to measure and optimize their viewability. So it's important that their DSPs or demand-side partners are able to meet those needs. And I think what advertisers should also ensure is that they're still buying efficiently when they're buying in-view impressions. They shouldn't be simply spending more money for every impression. They should be asking their demand-side partner to help them achieve higher view rates, but without a tremendous increase in cost. So, they should definitely strive for more viewable inventory, ask their DSPs to be partners, but not necessarily to dramatically higher vCPM.
Okay. A couple of questions have come in, one from me, some from the audience. It has to do with the concept of pre-bid. And one audience member said, are you monitoring, how are you monitoring with this pre-bid? Another question is, are pre-bid optimizations effective? Could you explain a little bit about what a pre-bid viewability metric is all about?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So, pre-bid simply means you have data that you're utilizing to help you make decisions on, where to bid for buying impressions in a real-time buying environment. So in a real-time buying environment, there's a constant stream of ad opportunities that are coming in, and the goal is to use data and sort of decision science to buy selectively the right ones that are going to help advertisers the most. And so there are different things you can do. You can buy, audiences. You can buy different sites. But in this case, what you're really trying to do is weed out the ad opportunities that have historically had lower historical and view rates, and focus your spend on the ones where you're more likely to achieve higher outcomes. So pre-bid optimization is essentially a tool that gives you, a data set that says for these publishers, for these domains, here's what we've seen as the in-view rates historically, and so you can direct your spend to the ones that have had the higher in-view rates. I think the other part of the question there was, how do you monitor that? And that's a good question. You really do need to have not only the pre-bid optimization piece in place, but you need to be able to measure the outcome, right? What you need to be able to see is, if you're adjusting your pre-bid optimization to target only the most viewable sites, are you actually seeing the in-view rates you're achieving, whether it's 70% or 50%? Are you meeting what you're trying to do? And so that's how we at Dataku monitor that. So we do that for our customers who are individually using pre-bid optimization, and we do it in aggregate just to ensure that the solutions that are in place are actually working as intended. And if there need to be adjustments or tweaks to improve the outcomes, then we go ahead and put those in place to the benefit of our customers.
Just a note to the audience, we have received a number of questions from audience members. We won't get to them all, but just so you know, RORY and his team at Dataku do get all the questions, and they will choose to follow up with you as they see fit, as they can. So if you don't hear your question addressed right now, look for a response from the Dataku team in the very near future. One more question from the audience, though, is what is your view on mobile in-app video viewability? Kind of a complicated mix of words, but
yeah, it's an open-ended question too. So I think when it comes to viewability for mobile in-app video, this is a challenge today, and the reason, without trying to get too technical, is when it comes to mobile in-app, it's very different from where programmatic and digital advertising started, which was in a desktop browser, right? And most browsers are very similar and have the similar capabilities. And when you go into mobile and you're on your mobile browser, it has the same capabilities as your desktop browser. But when you move into a mobile app, the capabilities are very different. You're not running in Safari or Chrome or whatever the browser is. You're running in a completely unique environment. And so that means the capabilities for measuring viewability are different. And for those of you who are sort of more in depth on this, the vPaid technology is what's typically used to measure viewability for video in a desktop environment. And within in-app, that vPaid, that technology is essentially not supported. So what's happening right now is there's a mix of, some publishers who have in-app inventory moving towards supporting vPaid. There are some who are, working with viewability vendors to get their software development kits embedded within their apps, which is another way that they can measure viewability. And there's some alternative technologies around MRC, which have historically been used but are not great solutions to measure mobile video viewability. But I think the industry is moving towards addressing that, and I think it's been one of the reasons that adoption of mobile video may have actually been a little bit slower than it could have been, is that a lot of people are wondering about these in-view rates. So I think there's a lot of incentive for this problem to be solved, and everyone is working together to solve it as quickly as possible. So I'd expect to see a lot of progress there in the coming months.
Yeah, and let me comment. That's the end of our questions, but there's another answer I want to throw out there because it's the industry movement. Working again with the MRC and the IAB, the MMA, and all of us are looking to find more compliant vendors to have strong measurement rates and have strong in-view rates. But it's also critical that we start to put some pressure on the SDK, the software development kit. Those are still subject to a lot of variation from publisher to publisher, from app to app, and from vendor to vendor. And we need better standardization of the SDK. So if you're out there and you're thinking of deploying or creating a new SDK, we advise you to try and find some common ground with SDKs that are already out there, because it is a continual problem. And it's one of those things like APIs that, while it's an open source product and byproduct of what we're living in that technology, there's some standards needed there to ease the transition from one improvement to the next in our business. So again, thank you very much, RORY Edwards from Dataku and the Dataku team for joining us. Thanks, Mariana, for helping us out. Let me finish off the presentation with just a final note from the MMA. RORY Edwards, of course, Senior Director of Business Development at Dataku, and you can reach him at redwards@dataku.com. In the meantime, we have a continuing webinar series. I believe our webinar for tomorrow has been delayed, but we have a Thursday the 15th webinar and a Thursday the 20th webinar. They're coming up. We have some upcoming events, one in Brazil on Ag Tech, a forum in Indonesia, and our Innovation Summit SM2 on September 26th and 27th here in New York City. If you're a member of the MMA, you can take a seat at the table and join any of our programs. As I mentioned before, our currency measurement program includes viewability. Feel free to go to our program pages and find out more about that there. We have other programs in process or up and running. Mobile programmatic, which Dataku is one of the co-chairs, is very important. They're also involved in native mobile video. We have Internet of Things and new mobile shopper marketing. We look for more participation there. Whether you're a member or not, you can participate in the conversations that we hold, whether it's getting great at mobile or looking through for mobile marketing insights through our social channels or whatnot. Last but not least, I want to say thank you and see you next time from the MMA. Thanks, everyone.